Hello and welcome back. Today, I thought I'd talk about how I did the lighting in my latest rendering. So, let's get into it. So, this is my scene file, and I just kit bashed it together to create this sort of sci-fi corridor. And then I added some fog to make the render a little grainy. And I also ended up getting these nice light rays shooting out of the sphere. Now, to show you how I created the lighting and fog, I'm going to switch to a new file and start from scratch. Okay, here's my file, and I want to keep it simple, so I just made a cube and deleted the front face, and then I beveled the edges so that I would have these angled faces. Then I did a quick UV mapping and applied a basic material. And I have my camera over here, and in the camera data properties, I have the focal length set to 35 millimeters. And in the output properties, I have my resolution set to 2480 by 1540. And in the render properties, I have the render engine set to cycles and the device set to GPU compute. Now I'm going to hit 0 on the number pad to jump into camera view. And I'm going to add a UV sphere. And I'll set the segments to 64 and the rings to 32. And I'll leave the radius set to 1 meter. Now with the sphere selected, I'm going to right click and shade smooth, and then I'll drag the sphere up until I'm centered in the camera view. Then I'll hit 0 again on the number pad to jump out of camera view. Now I want to add a point light, but if I do it right now, the light's going to come in down here at the location of the 3D cursor, which is currently sitting on the floor. So I want to move the cursor to the center of the sphere. So with the sphere selected, I'm going to hit Shift S and choose Cursor to Selected. And now you see the cursor has moved to the center of the sphere. So now I can hit Shift A and add a point light. And now it's come in and it's sitting at the location of the 3D cursor, which is now in the center of the sphere. And I'm going to turn the sphere off for right now. And with the light selected, I'm going to come over here to the data properties for the light. And I'm going to set the power to 5,000 watts and the radius to 0.03 meters. And I'm going to set the color to a sort of bluish purple, something like that. Then if I switch the viewport shading mode to rendered, you can see how it's looking. And I think that looks okay for now. So I'll switch back to material preview mode and I'll turn the sphere back on. Now with the sphere selected, I'm going to switch to the shading tab and I'm going to create a new material. And I'll just call it sphere. And I want this material to be like water, so I'm going to set the roughness down to 0 for now. And I'll set the transmission up to 1 and the IOR to 1.33. Next, I'm going to hit Shift A and add a bump node. And also a noise texture node. And I'll plug the noise texture into the height input on the bump node. And I'll plug the bump normal into the normal on the principled BSDF. And that will give me some nice waviness on the sphere. And I'm going to leave all these settings alone for right now. But if I switch to the viewport shading rendered mode, you can see that the sphere is casting a shadow on the walls. And that's because the light is not passing through the sphere. So to fix that, I'm going to add a light path node. And I'm going to plug the is camera ray into the alpha on the principled BSDF. And now you can see there's no more shadow and the light is passing through the sphere. So now I want to go back to my light and add my Caustics effect. So with the light selected, I want to come down here and enable Use Nodes. And that will allow me to see my light output and emission for my light. So from here, I want to add an image texture. And I need to browse for my Caustics image. Now this is one I found on Google Images. You can find a lot of this type, which is a photo looking straight down on a pool of water. And these will work fine if you want to apply them to an area light or a spotlight where you're just projecting them onto a surface. But if you're using a point light that's spraying light out in all directions, you're going to want a tileable texture. Otherwise, you're going to have visible seams projecting onto your surfaces. So this black and white image is tileable, and it's the one I used in my render. So I'll select this one, and then I'll plug it into my emission node. Now, right away, you can see that it's working, but it's way too dark. So I'm going to set the emission strength up to 15, and now we can see a little better. Next, I'm going to move the image texture over, and I'm going to add an RGB curves. And this is going to give me a little more fine control over the brightness. If I click on the line and drag up, it's going to get brighter. If I drag down, it's going to get darker. So I'll just set it right about there for now. And now the caustics are too big, so I'm going to add a mapping node and a texture coordinate node. I'll plug the mapping into the image texture. And then for the texture coordinate, when I did my rendering, I plugged normal into vector. And that worked pretty well because I had a lot of different shapes and details and things all over the walls and everywhere. But when I do it here, it looks stretched on these big flat walls. So if I go UV to vector, I think that looks a lot better. But it's still too big, so I'm going to set the X, Y, and Z values to 2. And I think that looks pretty good. Now, I don't like how small the bright spot is at the center of the sphere. So I'm going to go back to the sphere material, and I'm going to change the roughness to 0.2. I think that's a little better. Then I'm going to change the scale to 3 and also change the detail to 3. I think that's okay. And I want the caustics to be a little blurry, so I'm going to go back to the point light and I'm going to change this radius to 0.06. But that's a little too blurry. What about 0.05? Yeah, I think that's good. Now, the last thing I want to do is add some fog. So to do that, just add a cube, scale it up so that it covers all the objects in your scene, including your camera. Something like that. Now with the cube selected, go back to the shading tab and create a new material. Call it fog. What's going on here? All right, there we go. Okay, so you got your fog material. Delete this principled BSDF and add a principled volume. And you want to plug the volume into volume. And right now the fog is so thick that you can't see anything. So just come down here to the density and set it to 0.1. And now you can see what's going on. For my rendering, I wanted a little more of a subtle effect, so I set my density down to 0.03. And then you can also fine-tune the brightness by dragging the slider up to make this more bright, or drag it down to decrease the brightness. You can also give it a color if you want, but I'm going to leave it at 0. So once you get something you like, just hit F12 and render it. And here's the completed rendering. So that's about it for this one. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and post them below. And as always, if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.